going to turn on the people who have obviously not been able to make it today. So I'll just say, yes, welcome everybody. I've just turned on the recording. We're going to look at governance in the NDIS, simplified, which is my favorite thing to do with it, is simplify it. So sharing screen. If I can just have somebody say they can see my screen now. A yay or a nay?
No.
Nay. Okay, let's check out what's going on with the sharing. Share. How about now?
Yeah.
Good. Thank you so much. Thank you. So I going to pop it into presentation mode. Now I'm guessing if you're here, as with the title of my my webinar for today, I'm guessing if you're here, you want to improve or increase your knowledge or find out something that you might not know around governance as an NDIS provider, and that's what we're here to look at. So we're hoping that you'll come out of this with a basic understanding of governance, some knowledge around the framework embedded into the NDIS Quality and Safety Standards 2018, and not forgetting that there were some updates in 2021 in November, and they haven't changed the shape so much, apart from adding some practice standards with that. It has made a big impact, but we'll take that into account. Gain an understanding of board or management members' responsibilities in relation to the NDIS quality and safety standards. And finally, gain an understanding of how frameworks and systems and coordination of information can improve the governance. Wherever you might see the word board, let's remember it's interchangeable with management, because you know, prior to the NDIS, most services who were delivering under funding from our states, they had boards, and most of them were not for profit. Some of them were for profit, but they still had boards. So we're in a new era under the NDIS where we have a lot of small providers and a lot of providers who don't need a board given their size, and often don't come from a business background or a background of understanding governance frameworks or anything like that. So we've got a lot of different levels of expertise, education and knowledge out there, and some are struggling and some are booming and some are growing, you know, and really really showing us what they've got. So one of the reasons we want to talk about governance is because when I've walked into organizations, whether as a consultant or as an auditor, it's very easy to see that there are some governance issues, because I'm just going to check the chat box. Will we be forwarding the slideshow? I don't usually, but I do give you access to the recording if that's of any use. But I do have a bit of a giveaway for you today too, not my slide pack, but I've got a governance health check for you, which I thought you could take away and do in mind with your own organizations. So essentially we want to understand governance. There's a few words which are almost interchangeable. So we talk about governance and whether there is any governance and if we've got good governance. We talk a lot about compliance. We don't talk a lot about quality anymore, because compliance is the stick that I wave to get people to listen to quality. Once upon a time, before we had so many small providers in the NDIS, we would talk about quality improvement, and we knew we were talking about quality, risk, compliance and governance. But now we've got a very watered down market where it's not understood at this point. So we're trying to, you know, I'm trying to bring that back, and I know a lot of my colleagues are, and I know the quality and safety standards are trying to do the same thing, increase the literacy around quality and safety, compliance, standards and governance. They're so interchangeable, and you can't have good governance unless you've got risk, compliance and quality managed as well. So they really are very dependent and interdependent on each other. So let's have a little look and unpack why that is. So the key terms you're going to hear will be governance, compliance, risk, and we're going to talk about Division 2 of the NDIS quality and safety standards. And we're only doing that because it's the NDIS, and that is the particular division of the core module, which is about governance. It's all of the governance practice standards. There's several of them, and we'll have a look at them. And so the reason we're going to have a look at Division 2, which is governance in the NDIS quality safety standards, is if you want a governance framework, you are going to need to develop one around what your regulator or what your legislator says the governance is for your area. So I wouldn't be taking the Division 2 of the NDIS quality and safety standards to a home care provider and saying, this is how I want you to develop your governance framework for home care. There are many things within the NDIS quality and safety standards and the aged care standards which are aligned, but they're not exactly the same. So depending on the area that you work in and under which legislative tools you work under, that will guide what your governance is going to be. And so in this case, although there are some alignments and some similarities, but governance is governance everywhere you go, but it's got a different theme and a different flavour depending on the legislative instruments and regulations under which you will be working. So we're going to look at Division 2 of the NDIS quality and safety standards to see what a governance framework in the NDIS could look like. So then we talk a lot about, especially us auditors, we talk a lot about governance, risk and compliance. They come out together, they really do, because of the interdependence each one has on the other. And why do we talk about a framework? Because sometimes we need an architecture. For a house, we put up, we have an architect draw plans to say, how are we going to support this structure? And that's the architecture. So that in many ways, when you're looking at a house, it's all the beams and the pieces of wood that are going to hold that house, give it its framework. Yeah, just like scaffolding is a bit of a framework as well for people to be able to put pieces of wood to balance men and their tools to be working upon. So we need a framework as well that's going to support us to be able to manage our organisation and implement our governance. So when we talk about frameworks, they can look like anything. In fact, in many ways, you can be as innovative as you like with your framework. The framework itself isn't as important as the fact that it contains all of the elements, in this case, the elements under Division 2 of the NDIS quality and safety standards, Division 2 being governance, okay? So we're talking about some themes here around, interdependence between governance, risk, compliance, and even quality, if you want to throw that in as well. We're talking about where do we get our governance framework from? If we're an NDIS provider, we look to Division 2 of the NDIS quality and safety standards. That's where we look to. And what do we do to make it easier for us to implement? We try to make it in a framework. We try to make it in something that makes sense to us. Frameworks are about making sense of something. You might be that person who sits down and says, whoa, I've got 15 jobs to do. How can I write that down for myself? Well, you might be a table person and you might put it in a table. You could categorize it and say, oh, well, some of these are around the housework. Some of this is around some tools and the outdoors. Some of this is around a party that I've got to get ready for. You'll categorize it and it's going to make it easier for you by cutting it down to sort of 4 different things that have some sub information as well. So that's around how you're going to make it look attractive to you, how you're going to make it really conceptual, or even if it mimics reality rather than, actual rather than conceptual. It's going to be innovative according to what really does it for you. And everybody looks at things differently. Some people are verbal, some people are visual, some people love a spreadsheet, some people love a word table, other people love a design, some people will go into smart art and create the most amazing things. That's not important. What's important is that you base it on the right governance, the governance components, which as an NDIS provider, you will find in Division 2 of the NDIS Quality and Safety Standards. You can see I do tend to repeat themes because I want you to come away with those themes when we're finished here. And so we're going to have these key terms. Moving on. So what is Division 2? You know, a lot of people probably don't even look at it. You probably think, oh God, here comes my audit and what is going on? If you want to have good governance, which then in turn helps compliance, helps risk management, helps quality improvement, get a little bit familiar with Division 2 of the NDIS Quality and Safety Standards. And you'll also find it's no different to anything we've ever had before the NDIS. It's maybe a little bit more robust than when we were run by the states in terms of, you know, for New South Wales, ageing, disability and home care. We had a bit of a set of standards called the third-party verification scheme. This set of Division 2, this set of components for governance is not much different to the one that we would have had under the community service standards, community health and community service standards. It's not a lot different to the one we have in aged care. It's that's probably where the similarities kind of run out, although there are some standards in hospitals, if anyone's from hospitals, that there are some similarities there as well in the equip standards or the ACHS standards as well. So these are real similarities. It's not something that's been designed just for the NDIS. They've taken what would be a homogenous sort of group of components which represent governance, and they've flavoured it with the NDIS, and as aged care has flavoured it with the aged care standards. So it's not something that you have to just learn and think everything else is going to be different. It's not. If you can work across one area, NDIS, you won't take much to work across aged care either in terms of understanding the governance and these management frameworks. So Division 2 is the governance section within the quality and safety standards. It contains 8 subsections, which are board of directors or your management, or if you're a smaller organisation, the owner, need to ultimately have responsibility for, because it helps you to monitor those areas of your business. They've been chosen because they're the ones that can not only most drive you to success and scalability upward, which is what we hope, but also to bring you undone. So it's a double-edged sword. The proper implementation of these components of governance will assist your business to grow and grow well, and but also the neglect of them will result in what we see in the NDIS, for example, a lot of incidents, some complaints, a great deal of turnover of staff, all sorts of issues in the workplace. So that's what we see. So what is governance in itself like? What does the word mean? I always found as a policy analyst, it was really, really odd thing to do, but I thought, I'm just going to go back to the dictionary. Like, policy is all about words. It was about writing words that we could either write a news release, a press release, that was either going to have every peak body coming at us with machetes, or was going to have the peak bodies coming up to us wanting to shake our hands. Was the words that mattered. So don't ever hesitate to think, I don't know what that means. I'll look it up just for its definition. So governance refers to the system by which an organisation is controlled and operates, and the mechanisms by which it and its people are held to account. Okay, so there's a few different things in there, but essentially it's saying the first part, which is a system. So we talked about that system of components which really relate to the NDIS. then we talk about that being in place to control and help in the operations of the organisation and its people. And then we talk about the tools by which you might engage to actually do this job, because the concept on its own is lovely and you can sit and think about the concept for a long time, but without the tools and some know-how and some implementation, nothing much is going to change. I just have to see what's in the chat box. I'm sorry. Yes, everyone will get a copy of the recording. Absolutely. So governance, it's this kind of multi-layered definition, which brings together those words interdependently: governance, risk, compliance, quality. They all work together to do this. So multi-layered, not just one thing describing governance. Excuse me. So if we're talking about these things being related, let's look at what compliance is. The term compliance describes the ability to act according to an order, set of rules, or a request. Somebody put their hand up or say in the chat box, I don't mind. What is the set of rules in the NDIS that you're trying to be compliant to? Don't be shy. We've already mentioned it. There's a chat. The 8 substandards, yes, absolutely. But greater than that, the entire set of rules is? What was above those 8 substandards and then above that? So the 8 substandards sits under Division 2 of the core module. What is the greater overarching set of rules? Yes, it's the NDIS quality standards. Now, bearing in mind also, and I'll ask this question, where did we get the NDIS quality and practice standards and safety standards from? Where did they come from? Did we just pull them out of the sky? Or did they come from? And the indicators, yeah, we've got the practice standards, we've got the quality indicators, which make it possible for us to audit organisations and compare apples with apples, etc. So these quality and safety standards, which happen in every single one of these vulnerable people's type organisations, they were pulled from somewhere. Not word for word, but they were pulled from I'm moving my arms around like you can see me, but they were pulled from another set of rules and regulations. Yeah, the National Disability Insurance Act, okay? Yes, rules and legislation. There's rules and legislation. So it always starts that way. That's how it starts. So, we have a legislation, policy analysts, etc., are asked to implement that. They might create some operational guidelines, which the NDIA has. And then at some point, some kind of practice standard or whatever you'd like to call it will be created, which draws from this legislation. So essentially, we've got a direct line in our governance all the way up to the Act, okay? But it's kind of implemented in several different documents all the way down. All right, even your set of policies and procedures, which are based on, tell me what they're based on, what your set of policies and procedures that you would have as an NDIS provider, where are they drawn from? Are they just made up? Yeah, the NDIS standards, correct, which is taken from the legislation and the rules. Okay, so now we're cooking and we can see that line. Can you see that line? And that's a bit of a line of governance, if you like. Okay, so that is how, that is how a policy unit would look at how are we going to govern this. So they're going to govern that because they've got the legislation, then they've got the quality and safety standards, then they've got a little adjunct in there, which is the practice standards as well as the quality and safety standards, which are, work together. And then you are told you must have policies and procedures for very specific areas of those. So this is a line of governance coming from government, the funder. Okay, so now you're being asked to do the same, because you as business owners or managers of businesses have a whole lot of people and a whole lot of things to manage. So it's time for you to start using those very same concepts to manage everything under you. Okay, so this is where they come from. They all make perfect sense. They're all well thought through for the most part. There are some things I would change, but I would say that about any area. I think we all would. But they align. So we've got compliance. Compliance describes the ability to act according to an order or a set of rules. You can see now compliance is linked to governance, because governance is how we implement and we make sure all these things happen and everyone's accountable. And the compliance is how well we can stay in alignment and do the things we're asked to do properly. So compliance, we know now, is linked to governance. An NDIS provider, the quality and safety standards represent a broad compliance obligation. That's the broadness of it. What's risk? So in simple terms, risk is the possibility of something bad happening. Okay, so we know that innately within us. We know what a risk is, but sometimes it's very difficult for people to actually articulate that. And that's why I even running simple workshops on risk and risk assessment is really, really useful for people, because we have this abstract concept. Yes, we know risk, but they can't articulate it, and they can't articulate it well enough and understand it enough to know how to set it out step by step by step. So we all know what risk is. You know what risk is. We all do. We probably think of insurance or, that sort of thing. In the context of corporate governance within an NDIS organisation, risk can be financial, risk can be reputational, very much so. Risk can be regulatory. We're talking about those big documents that are put out to guide us. Risk can be clinical. Risk can be informational. So it can be around, remember I was talking about when you communicate poorly, and I put out a very bad press release and every single peak body in New South Wales would attack me. That's a bit of an informational, but we also have the informational from the point of view as data breach, when we are not taking care of the data we're storing and the information we're collecting. So we have a couple of ways to look at that. And then safety in general as well. So we've looked at, I'm hoping you can see, oh yeah, there is a synergy there between risk and compliance and governance. So those three things, they're quite intertwined in many ways. And then we think, well, if we're talking about a governance framework, well, we talked about a framework before, and I know I've already said that, but I'll just finish the slide anyway. So in general, a framework is, it could be real or it could be conceptual. So in terms of, it could really be something on a piece of paper that when written down, you can see, oh yes, I can see how that flows from that to that, and that's a real framework. Or it could be something that you make into a graphic that isn't real, but it most certainly shows you how it works. And that's where your smart art or etc. can come in. And that's why some visual stuff is really, really useful. I was doing some work at one of the big nursing home residential aged care facilities across 4 of them in Sydney, helping them get ready for their new standards, which came in 2020 or might have been 2019. And they were a lot of rewriting of policies was occurring. And the management wanted to do it one way. And I said, look, we've got to look at your client, your staffing. A lot of the staff I've seen, they look to be from a non-English speaking background. Why don't we ask them? And so we went to them and said, how do you like this policy or this policy? And one of them was visual. Instead of having all the words, it was visual. They hands down wanted the visual conceptual diagram. It's too hard for a lot of people to read. And you know what? Even if it's not too hard, even if they're the best readers ever, their literacy and numeracy is incredibly high, they don't want to. And I'm all about not dealing with wish it were different, or we can make it, you know, why don't we change them all? Deal with who we've got. And who we've got, if we look at the cohort of staff that are carers and support workers, and we deal with that in the reality of that, then we will do much better. But when we keep on hoping for better and just putting out policies that we expect people to read, the truth of the matter is they're probably not going to, which is why I turned all my policies into small bite-sized modules that people could either listen to or watch and listen to, because I'm dealing with the reality. This is this group of people. And quite frankly, you know, I think that, well, what happens is some of the good ones, and we do get good ones, that's where we get our good ones from, isn't it? I was a good one once, I'm sure some of you are. They'll become managers, they'll become business owners, they become policy analysts. So we have to keep on replacing them and replenish. So we have to look at the reality of who we're working with and how we're going to get the best from that group of people. And if we continually pump out policies that are all words and sometimes not particularly well written words, then we're not going to have an uptake of people wanting to read them. And also understanding how to look for what we want to look for is, you know, I've seen people go through reading pages and pages, and I've gone, have you thought before scrolling through that on the computer or your laptop, have you thought of doing a word search? You know, we've got to make it easy for people, and the easier some things are, the better, the more likely they are to oblige you and read their policies. And that goes for managers and coordinators, etc. One example, you might think, who wouldn't do that? Who would not read their policies? I remember fondly one of my audits a couple of years ago, just before COVID hit, and I was sitting in this person's office. We thought they were a great organisation. We really liked them. We had no thoughts of them not getting through at all. I said, she asked me, I think she got to the 20th question that she had for me. And I said, and you know what, there's really good questions. These are all really, really good questions. And funnily enough, when I was reading through your policies and procedures last night, they're full of the answers to the questions you just asked me. And so I said, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, I don't think you've read your policies, have you? And they said, no. It's like, well, you know, like, it's not rocket science. I didn't say this, but I mean, it's not rocket science. Most of the problems I see are someone doesn't know their policies, someone's never read their position description, or somebody hasn't been given a position description. And this is all policy, risk and compliance. Governance, risk and compliance. So there's some very, very easy fixes for a lot of things. So we can have a real framework, we can have a conceptual framework. I'm going to show you the difference between those two. And what I encourage is, plagiarize all you like. You can take anything of mine away, I don't mind. And copy, you know, be as innovative as you can. And if something made sense to you, there's a chance it might make sense to other people as well. So, so let's look at the governance, risk and compliance link a little more closely. Think of it like an umbrella. Because it's an umbrella term, governance, risk and compliance. We seldom break it up. I only break it up where I really am dealing with the nitty gritty, or, you know, for a mechanical reason. So it's an umbrella term, governance, risk and compliance. Why do we talk about governance, yellow, risk, red, compliance, blue, all being together? Because you can't have effective governance if you're not managing risk and compliance. Can anyone there tell me honestly that someone who wasn't managing their risk, no risk assessments, no risk register, no compliance audits, no checking to see if people had PDs, no vetting of their staff, could you tell me anyone that organisation has a good governance? it couldn't be. It just couldn't be, because that's all part of governance as well. You can't have effective compliance if you don't manage governance and risk. So if you're not risk assessing by its very very description of that, by the very sentence, you're not compliant. And if you're not compliant, you can't have good governance. So you can't be managing risk effectively if you don't have good governance and compliance. So does anyone not see the synergies in there? Because I'd really like to talk about that if you don't see how interdependent these things are on each other. I'm going to take that as a everybody sees it, and that's really good. And that's the first part to putting in place really good governance, which will just flow on to some risk and to some compliance, which will still need a little bit of work and implementing, but it starts it off. So a board or a management team must have oversight of the governance, risk and compliance. How can this be achieved? I'm going to give you a really good example of what I mean by oversight. And often I love to see the penny drop in people's faces. You might already have it. It might be already dropped for you. But here's a perfect example, which I just love. As a service provider I was working with, he had just grown so big, so quickly. And of course, that's what happens to a lot of people. And their paperwork and their documentation and then their governance is not at the same stage. So he was getting ready for an audit. I had taken him through getting ready all of his compliance management stuff. And I'd said, you must have a risk assessment for every single individual. It says it, there's a practice standard. It's irrelevant whether I think there should be one. The practice standard says every participant must have a risk assessment. If there's nothing in it, is nil. It's nil in the risk assessment, but everyone must be given the opportunity to be risk assessed. And he goes, oh, I've done it all, boss. I've done it. I've got it all there. 150 clients we risk assessed in the last week. And I went, fantastic. What did you do with the risk assessments? And he said, I put them all in their files. And I went, what about in the participant risk assessment register? And he said, oh, is that what that's for? And I went, yeah, how are you going to know who's due on what date? Are you going to go running backwards and forwards to that 150 files? Because I know it works for 5 files, but it doesn't work for 150, does it? So it doesn't matter whether you use a risk register or whether you've got a piece of software that reminds you when it's due. The actual tool doesn't matter, but the process must be in place. And it's called a helicopter view. So we're looking down instead of looking just at the same level as those 150 client files. We get up into a helicopter, which means we have a risk register or we have a piece of software with a date and the capacity to be able to send us an email. And we then have a bird's eye view of everything that's going on. Okay, so that's the aggregated view, the helicopter view, the oversight. And sometimes when I've looked at the NDIA in the way it's been rolled out the last few years, sometimes I just look at it and think, wow, someone's really lost oversight. And then I see them pick it up again. But a lot of the time, you know, there's a fair bit of loss of oversight with the NDIS from government level. So really important concept here, governance. What is my oversight? How can I look at everything? How can I look at my kingdom? How can I look at all of these things and not just look at them on a granular one-to-one level, like going to a person's file? We must know what's going on from a bird's eye view so that we're managing our risk and our compliance. So governance, risk and compliance by having a really good view of what's going on, our helicopter view, really important. Doesn't matter how you do it, but there's a few good tools for doing it. Compliance registers or you know, Excel spreadsheets with filtered with dates for date due, the most important date in a register of any kind, date due. What date's this due? What dates are going to expire? What date is my risk assessment due again? What date. You know, we're looking to be reminded to keep on top of these things so they don't expire, because then we're at risk and we're non-compliant. So what needs to be viewed? Well, at minimum, all the components of that governance is found in the NDIS quality and safety standards. Governance, operational management, number 1, which is in Division 2. Risk management, which is in Division 2 of the core. Incident management, which is in Division 2 of the core. Complaints and feedback, which is in the Division 2. Human resources, one of our biggest risks, one of our biggest assets, but one of our biggest risks. Information management as well. Big help, but can be a risk. Continuity of care. Definitely in our more vulnerable services, continuity of care takes its own subsection in a governance Division 2. Same as in aged care, it does. And quality management, kind of like quality management is this thing that's holding everything together in some ways as well, because quality is a way that you look at things. And for any quality managers out there, once you've got the quality vision, the quality focus, you can't ever lose it. You can't unsee it and unknow it. It's just something that never goes after that. You look at things differently. And that's was very noticeable for me, like 20 years ago when I first started taking an organisation that I worked with through their first quality audit. Once I saw how and what it does, this governance, risk, compliance and quality, I could see that I would never start another service without first getting all those things in place, because it's easier to get them in place than it is to retrospectively fit them. So it's like making sure that every new service that you bring on into an organisation is fitted out with all of the same checks and balances that the ones you've got going already do have. And that way it can never be lost sight of. And that's, I'm going to show you a conceptual framework for how I see that in a second. So how can we set up some governance monitoring systems? Well, a framework, and you may develop one or you may adopt one. That's up to you. Let's look at some examples of governance frameworks for NDIS standards. This is a really simple one. And this one might speak to you like, you know, just in a kind of hierarchy sort of hanging tree motion way. Now this one you can see I've taken, if you saw before, all of these, like I'll just move my cursor, the NDIS governance framework, we're really using Division 2 here to represent a framework, okay? So I've taken all the elements that are in Division 2, except what I've done is I've taken governance and operational management and I like it there. I'm not saying it's right to be there. I'm just saying that's how I like it, because governance and operational management sort of sits above all of these. That's just in my mind. It doesn't have to be in yours. And that, to me, it holds these guys together. So I would look at this a little bit sometimes like, you know, a position or people's duties or how I'm going to split up how these go. In my time, what I've always done is I just thought, I just can't do all this governance on my own. What am I going to do? And my mentor at the time said, give people portfolios, give people, you know, it's not so much part of their everyday job, but give them this sort of additional thing that might take 1 or 2 hours a week and give them a portfolio area. And that's how you build the capacity of your workforce and not make yourself so stressed that you're gonna have a heart attack, because no one person can do it. We have to share that load, and the more that these things are being spread and what's the word, the responsibility is shared, you not only build your capacity, but you take a load off yourself as well. Also, it makes jobs more interesting for people and builds their character and lets them see what's possible in their own career. So this is no more, what you're seeing here, no more than what's in Division 2. It's no more, no less, just it's in a framework. Something else that might mean something to you, it's just an example, is, you know, with governance and operational management sitting there in the middle, and once again, all of these floating around it, just wanting something to sort of take your interest in terms of that concept and where you might go with it. The one, this may not work for you guys, but it certainly does for me. And I've always thought of it for a really long time now about what is this framework that I'm putting together? What these tools I'm using to try to keep all these things happening and in motion, is so that if I start another service and I don't pull it into my framework, it can become what's called a rogue planet. It means somebody just misses it and you don't get to hear what's going on with it. So let's have a look at how I sort this. So if the sun is the management team or the manager, whoever is, you know, in charge or whatever structure's in charge, then you've got your governance and operational management, your risk management, your complaints management, your incident management, your, there's something under there, might be information management, but my what's her name is sitting in front of me, probably can, not sure, can't see it with my screen sharing thing there. Information management, and last but continuity of care and quality management. These are all in what I call the what do you call this? I've just forgotten the name. I've used this for so long. The gravitational pull. So it's in the gravitational pull and it isn't going to go away. So we've got them all in the place where we know we've got our eye on them. They're being reported up on a team leader agendas. They're being reported on in staff meeting. They're being reported on in an executive level meeting. Everything about these is being monitored and is part of the every day, every week, every month kind of to-do list, if you like. And so another way to look at that is that somehow someone has to have a tentacle in each of these areas. So another way to look at it is, you know, you might have an executive level meeting and then you might have operations underneath that. And somehow that operations level needs to know what's going on in each of these areas. And this is your governance framework. And mind you, it's also your compliance framework. It's also your risk framework. And it's also your quality framework. It's all of those things. It's not, you're not just covering off on governance. If you take on this framework of governance, you are also covering compliance, risk, and quality. Okay. So the governance and operational management is the octopus. The octopus has a tentacle in each of these areas. And when we say tentacle, I mean, and it doesn't have to be this way, but I mean an agenda item. You know, I have standing agenda items. The one way I can make sure I'm collecting all the information from the front line and reporting it up to the top so that we can assess it and analyze it and make decisions is by having agenda items. And you can't have reports from team meetings and executive meetings if you're not having meetings. And it's really easy to see when organizations aren't having regular meetings. If they don't put value on a meeting, there's usually a really distinct way to see that. It could be staff no cohesion with the staff. Whingy staff are often the first ones to complain, the ones who don't come to the meetings. The people who come to the meetings, they're getting informed, they're feeling a part of, they're part of the solution, not part of the problem. So a lack of cohesion and abundance of incidents and accidents and complaints usually occur when people are not having regular staff meetings. So here we have our solar system. We want to keep things in the gravitational pull. And if I start that service that I talked about and I think, I'll worry about, bringing that into staff meetings and, talking about that at, where I need to talk about it later, because once it's not in that gravitational pull, those agendas, those reports, those discussions, it can become a rogue planet. And rogue planets usually just start doing whatever they want. Services that don't get enough attention usually morph into something that they weren't meant to be. So I hope that concept, whichever one it is that kind of the light comes on for you, makes it really clear, just on a conceptual level, how easy governance, risk and compliance really is. And that you probably understood some of that before, but may not have thought of the terminology. So this one's just been cast out of the governance system because it just never came to staff meetings. It didn't have an agenda item. It could be, the halfway house down the road at wherever, and it just never got a look in. And so all of a sudden someone's turned it into a disco, and this is what would happen back in the days, when running organisations where you had half a dozen different services all over Sydney. If you're not looking at it, if you turn your back on the ocean, or you turn, there's a rule, you don't turn your back on the ocean because a wave will hit you, and you don't turn your back on a class of kindergarten kids because you don't know what's going to happen behind your back. Same as in governance, don't turn your back on things because while you're not looking, things are going to happen. So applying these, we need some tools, and none of these are going to be tools that you haven't got. First of all, everyone needs to be aware. How are they going to be aware? Everyone has to have a position description, and not a position description you downloaded from Seek that was from another organisation. Do that by all means, but make it work for you. It has to be the responsibilities and the activities that you need in that organisation. The biggest thing I find is, and here's one I love too, I just can't get my staff to do anything I want. They're just hopeless. They just don't do anything I want. And eventually I say, can I see their position descriptions? Oh, we don't have any just now. It's just like, well, here's our beginning. Like, how can we ever expect somebody to deliver for us if we don't give them not only a position description, but an accurate one, and that we revise that position description, and that position description, informs a performance appraisal. And we do that performance appraisal on a regular basis because we can't complain about somebody that we're not even giving the right information to in the first place. So that's somewhat overlooked, but one of the fundamentals. The directors need to, or the management team need to know what the business's vision is. And if you haven't got one, make one. If you haven't got a strategic plan, do yourself a favor and put one in and get one made so that you've got a long-term strategic plan with a business plan for implementing those strategies year by year by year, and get everybody on the same page with you. Otherwise, they'll all be dancing off in different directions. So that's governance. That's about pulling your governance strings together. People have to be accountable, and accountability improves with regular meetings, regular discussions, regular supervision, and self-assessment. So in self-assessment, if you have a management team, with a not-for-profit board, they have to it's sort of mandatory for them to self-assess under the standards, but also with management should look at themselves as well. And we ask people to self-assess at their, a month out from their performance appraisal. So it's not an unusual thing to do. We ask people how they think they're going, and then a supervisor should give feedback, and that should happen all the way up and down in an organisation. So applying them, we would use things like reporting. So we report. What do we report from? Well, we collect information in staff meetings. We take action note. We take minutes from those, and we have actions from that, and we report. Now, if a CEO or a general manager is having problems with the entire organisation, the person up the top it's very hard to point the finger at everybody else if you haven't got it right yourself. So start from the top and work your way down. An organizational report template is often good. Find out what it is you want to know. What is it that you need to know now that you've got a really good idea of what the governance components are? Then think about what are the things you really want to know that make your life easier and the things you need to keep an eye on. You add that to those information collection sessions. Having a terms of reference for your management meetings, having a terms of reference for your staff meetings. If you're a big organization, you're probably you already have a committee for quality and safety. If you're finding your quality and safety has gone wild or it's out of control, think of slipping in that extra layer of governance, which would be a committee which comes together from different parts of your organization, meets and discusses the issues and problems. That solves a lot of problems and really contributes to good governance. Everyone, including directors, CEOs, anyone in your organization should have a position description. Otherwise, you can expect the unexpected. They need to be reviewed. So that's step one, simple stuff. Then being able to recognize those issues, people need to be able to ask questions directly to the CEO. There need to be answers for those. You need investigations on why things are not occurring instead of brushing it under the carpet. Some way of assessing your level of compliance to the Division 2. And that comes with simple audits that you do on a semi-regular basis, having one part of your organization audit another part. The practice standards say that you will have an audit, I think, no less than annually. So, and I don't mean an external audit, I mean internal. So putting in place some sort of schedule for internal auditing gives you something to report on and a capacity to understand, you know, how your compliance and risk is going, which supports your governance. And the people who, there's another way of finding out, you just get lots and lots of complaints and incidents and you know you probably got some compliance issues, but that's not the way I prefer. Agendas will support you to do this. Agendas with standing items which align to that Division 2, most importantly. I think I just did that. So being mindful that using reports and certain things like that you can lose pieces of information. So make sure that the most important information is reported up from those staff meetings. And sometimes that can be a certain person might need to, I guess what I'm saying is if you just maybe got an admin person typing up the notes, sometimes some of that stuff can be lost. So it's important to figure out which information needs to be passed on or have a really good template for capturing that in the first place. So your agendas are in the orbit, the agendas at board level, the agendas at management level, the agendas at staff level, agenda for a subcommittee if you have one. All these agendas should align with respect to those 8 substandards, okay? So that way you've got this thread going through all those agendas, linking up all of those items, and you can't miss out on reporting them. Even if there's nil, is there an incident this week at staff level? No, then that will be reported, if it's fortnightly meeting or monthly meeting, that will be reported up. There'll come a week when there is an incident. Is there any human resource issues? Do we have any resourcing issues, etc.? Do we have risk? The most rich data area for collecting information on risk throughout your organization is with your support workers. They might not know what the meaning of the word risk is or how to recognize it, but when you ask it of them in a way that they do understand, has anyone seen some stuff that's unsafe that they're a bit worried about? That is the richest way of collecting information and ensuring that it doesn't become an incident. So aligning those things is a perfect tool. So once again, the other tools that you will need in good governance development, position descriptions, accurate ones, and ensure that you update them. Terms of reference for meetings, subcommittee terms of references, director position descriptions, CEO position description, manager position descriptions, all staff position descriptions, and any independent contractor expectations. I find that sometimes people forget about the independent ABN contractor and maybe don't have performance appraisals or review their contracts or give them a position description. Once again, leaving yourself open for someone to make it up in their own mind what it is they need to do. So supporting good governance, aggregated reporting, keeping things on the radar with standing agenda items in each area of governance, evidence of oversight, which might be minutes, notes produced to record actions and any issues, and then accountability, areas of governance linked to a job description. So if somebody's position description says they are going to be the continuous quality improvement person, that's accountability. And so you can actually answer at audit, yes, we know who does our continuous quality improvement because this is in their position description. And that's the same for all of those components. If it's not written down, we just don't have any evidence that it's occurring. So there's some tricks for supporting good governance. Does anyone have any questions? Welcome to turn on your mics if there's anything you want to add, any questions you've got. Now I've got a good governance health check, which I will send out with the recording to everybody. You might like to do that on your organisation. So no questions at all? You're a quiet bunch. Well, if you have any questions, you can email me at inquiry@effectivepolicy.com.au if you don't feel like asking anything from here. And what I'm going to do is email out the recording once it's downloaded itself and your health check. And you can have a test and thank you so much. With the no, it doesn't matter how many participants you have. An Excel can manage many participants. I'm thinking though that if you once you start getting over, you know, I've got clients who are still using a risk register, which is 150 clients on it, and they have a software, but you know what, they chose to use the register because what they like is that on an Excel you can get the dates to filter, and they can come in every Monday and they can see who's due now. Some people are quite visual like that, even though they might get a reminder. I'm like that. I love to see the spreadsheet and be able to see the dates all in the sorted in from soonest to furthest away. We have risk assessments attached to plans and service agreements. Do we still need a separate register? The register is not the mandatory part. The mandatory part is, can you show us how you know when that person's due, and are you reminded to do that new risk assessment? It's the process. So it's sometimes just the register that people use to do that. Hi, would it, oops, I just got to go back. Would it benefit with a flowchart or similar that provides steps in? Oh gosh, yes. My policies proceed through, so busy, I'm overwhelmed, where to start. I just really think, take your policy that you've got, cut it down into, don't change it because it'll need to be like that at audit. But if you put on the front of the policy, which is what I'm going to do with mine, a step 1, step 2, and it's the absolute essence of what to do. I'm going to be putting those and adding them onto my own policies as well. Any way I can try to get people to read what's in the policy, I will have a go at it. So do try that. People are often visual creatures, and they certainly don't like lots and lots of information. Another question, do you have a pre-audit checklist for us to check our governance status and to potentially see if we are all meeting compliance? Look, I do have a I have internal audits, which a template for an internal audit, which you can ask the question of yourself. I am in the process of developing online a what do you call it? Gap analysis. Is yours urgent, or can you wait, you know, maybe a few weeks or a month? Because I think I'll have it ready by then. If you can wait that long, it's on my to-do list right now to turn it into a gap analysis that gives people feedback. My pleasure, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you not enjoyed it. I really hope you got something from it. And read the pre-audit checklist. Jose, feel you're welcome to give me an email or a call, and I'll explain to you how long I think it'll be before I have it ready. I think I've got another one here. Hang on. 2 seconds. Oh, good. I'm glad. I hope you like my solar system. I know it's weird, but it works. What's that, Sky? Anything visual as you have just provided is helpful. Oh, right. Oh, good, good. Thank you so much. I'm so glad. Thank you, Tika. Yeah, I do. I've got a lot already recorded, which are on my learning management system, and I'm just starting to get a bit more regular again, trying to run a webinar every week. I just got a little bit weighed down. My next webinar, I think, is going to be a 1 hour with a workshop on how to do participant risk, like a bit of an interactive. The more I can get people assessing risk and understanding it and what to do with it next, I think the better off we'll all be. And any ideas for webinars, please just shoot me an email. Oh, for team leaders. Yeah, well, I guess they are really for team leaders. Your support workers aren't really doing too many. Well, I think mine would be very geared towards the team leaders. So yeah, look, I'm hoping to get that up, Catherine. I started putting it up just before I went into the webinar. So yeah, we should be doing that next week. I love doing that one. I do have Sky. I used to run workshop called Introduction to Support Coordination. I tend to leave the really complex stuff for other people, and I take people right back to the very beginning with support coordination. And you know, I find support coordinators are so focused on getting on the portal that they've forgotten what support coordination was. There is a recording you can access of a 5-hour workshop that I did, but you may be more advanced than that. But a lot of the people who did the support coordination intro found it really valuable, because nobody ever talks about all the old stuff before the NDIS, which is why we're here. So yeah, I tend to leave the really complex stuff to other people and just deal with that really. What is a connection? What is an informal support? You know, why are we here? What are the NDIA expecting of us? Yeah. I'll put my training portal link up here.